An Amish virgin asked a mountain man for shelter, and he said, "Only if you marry me by sunset." Snow whips across the Colorado peaks. A frightened young woman flees into the night. Her father has traded her away to a ruthless cattle baron. She runs until her strength fails and knocks on the door of a scarred mountain man. Inside, the fire burns low. His voice is steady, his eyes cold. "I'll give you shelter, but only if you marry me by sunset." She trembles, she prays, and when the vows are spoken by firelight, the storm outside is nothing compared to the storm that follows. Hoofbeats in the dark, riders demanding her return, a sheriff with papers in his hand, a powerful rancher who claims her as his prize. But the mountain man will not yield, though he's sworn never to kill again. And the girl who once lived in silence must find the courage to speak her choice before the whole town. Will their bond survive the law, the lies, and the guns that ride against them? Or will love by firelight be buried in snow before spring? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The January wind howled through the Colorado foothills, bitter and sharp as a knife's edge. Nika Yoder pulled her woolen shawl tighter around her shoulders, but the cold found every gap, every seam in her plain dress. Her heart pounded against her ribs as she crept through the darkened farmhouse, past the bedroom where her parents slept. The conversation she'd overheard earlier that day still rang in her ears, her father's voice, worn and defeated. "Very well, Mr. Tanner. The marriage will take place next month." Then Eli Tanner's smug reply, "Smart decision, Yoder. Your debt will be forgotten once your daughter becomes my wife." Nika's fingers trembled as she gathered her few possessions in the pre-dawn darkness. Into a small cloth bundle went a loaf of bread, her mother's prayer book, and a spare dress. The wooden floorboards creaked beneath her feet as she made her way to the back door, each sound thundering in her ears. Outside, frost sparkled on the bare branches of the apple trees. The barn door's hinges protested softly as she slipped inside. Her mare, Grace, nickered a quiet greeting. "Shh," Nika whispered, pressing her forehead against the horse's warm neck. "We must be silent." With practiced hands, she saddled Grace, securing the bundle behind the saddle. A lifetime of rising before dawn to help with chores served her well now. She knew every rope, every buckle by touch alone. The familiar sense of hay and the horse brought tears to her eyes. This barn had been her sanctuary since childhood, but now she had to leave it all behind. As she led Grace from the barn, the first pale light of dawn began to paint the eastern sky. Nika mounted carefully, arranging her skirts, then urged the mare forward. They crossed the sleeping farmyard, past the silent house where her family would soon wake to find her gone. The weight of her decision pressed against her chest like a physical thing. "Dear Lord," she prayed silently as they reached the road, "guide my path. Show me the way to safety." The words of Matthew came to her mind. "Take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid." She clung to that verse as Grace's hooves carried her away from everything she'd ever known. The morning sun rose into a steel-gray sky as Nika guided Grace higher into the foothills. Snow lay deep in the shadowed places between the pine trees, and their breath steamed in the frigid air. She had heard stories of these mountains, tales whispered by travelers passing through their settlement, stories of wild animals, of lonely trappers, of dangers lurking in the wilderness, but surely any fate was better than being forced to marry Eli Tanner. She had seen the cattle baron many times in town, his expensive clothes, his arrogant stride, the way other men stepped aside when he passed. But it was his eyes that frightened her most. Cold and calculating, like he was always measuring the worth of everything and everyone around him. The thought of being bound to such a man made her shudder. By midday, the trail had become treacherous. Ice glazed the rocky path, hidden beneath a dusting of snow. Grace picked her way carefully, but Nika could feel the mare's uncertainty in every step. They rounded a bend, and suddenly Grace's hooves slid out from under her. The mare went down hard, throwing Nika clear. She landed in a drift of snow, the impact driving the breath from her lungs. For a moment she lay there, struggling to draw air into her chest. When she finally managed to sit up, she saw Grace standing nearby, head lowered and favoring her left foreleg. "Oh no," Nika whispered, scrambling to her feet. She approached the mare slowly, running gentle hands over the injured leg. Grace flinched at her touch. The leg wasn't broken. Praise God for that small mercy. But the strain was clear. The horse couldn't carry her any further. Nika retrieved her bundle from where it had fallen, brushing off the snow. The bread inside was squashed but still edible. She broke off a piece for Grace, then tucked the rest away. "I'm sorry, old friend," she murmured, stroking the mare's nose. "But you must return home now. They will care for you there." With a sharp pat to Grace's rump, she sent the mare back down the trail. Watching her childhood companion disappear around the bend brought fresh tears, but Nika forced herself to turn away. She had to press on. The afternoon stretched endlessly as she trudged through the snow. Her boots, made for farm work rather than mountain climbing, grew sodden and heavy. The cold crept into her bones despite her layers of wool clothing. As the sun began to sink behind the mountains, despair crept into her heart. What if she froze to death up here? What if wild animals found her? She thought of her warm bed at home, of her mother's cooking, of the familiar rhythm of prayers and work that had shaped her days. But then Eli Tanner's cold eyes filled her mind, and she squared her shoulders. Better to die free than live caged. The light was failing fast when she spotted it, a thin curl of smoke rising above the trees. Hope surged through her tired body. Where there was smoke, there must be shelter. Her numb feet found new strength as she pushed through the deepening twilight toward that promise of warmth. The cabin materialized slowly out of the gathering darkness. Rough-hewn logs, a sturdy chimney of fitted stone, a small barn to one side. A single window glowed with lamplight. Nika stood at the edge of the clearing, her heart thundering in her chest. Who might live in such a remote place? Would they help her or turn her away? Or worse, would they send word to Eli Tanner? "Trust in the Lord with all your heart," she whispered, drawing on her faith for courage. Then she forced her frozen feet to carry her across the snow-covered yard to the cabin's heavy pine door. Her knock sounded feeble to her own ears, but she heard movement inside immediately, the scrape of a chair being pushed back, then bootsteps crossing a wooden floor. Nika held, her breath as those steps approached the door. Everything in her life had led to this moment, this choice. She silently prayed that whatever lay on the other side of that door would prove to be God's answer to her prayers for deliverance. The footsteps stopped. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then she heard the sound of a latch being lifted, and the door began to open. The firelight from within threw into sharp relief the figure of a tall man, broad-shouldered and weather-worn. His dark hair was shot through with gray at the temples, and his face bore the hard lines of someone who had seen more than his share of trouble. But it was his eyes that caught and held Nika's attention. They were watchful, wary, yet not unkind. For a moment, they simply stared at each other across the threshold. Nika opened her mouth to speak, but the long day's trials suddenly caught up with her. The world tilted sideways, darkness crowding the edges of her vision. The last thing she saw was the stranger lunging forward to catch her as her legs gave way beneath her. The door creaked open wider, spilling golden lamplight across the snow. A broad-shouldered man filled the doorframe, his weathered face half hidden in shadow. A long scar traced its way across his jaw, pale against his tanned skin. His blue eyes were sharp and wary as he lifted a brass lantern, its light catching the silver threading through his dark hair at the temples. "Who goes there?" His voice was deep and rough, like he didn't use it often. Nika tried to speak, but her teeth chattered so violently she could barely form words. "But please," she managed finally, "I need shelter." The cold. She wrapped her arms tighter around herself, her sodden wool dress offering little warmth now. The man, Jack Hale by the name carved into the doorpost, studied her with those penetrating eyes. His gaze took in her plain dress, her simple cap, the prayer book clutched in her frozen fingers. Understanding flickered across his face. "You're Amish," he said. It wasn't a question. What brings one of the plain folk so far into these mountains? Alone? "I had no choice," Nika said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please, I will freeze if I stay out here." Jack's jaw tightened as he glanced past her into the gathering darkness. The wind had picked up, driving needle-sharp crystals of snow before it. He looked back at her, conflict clear in his expression. "I cannot simply take in an unmarried woman," he said finally, whereas wouldn't be proper. "These mountains are isolated, but word still travels, so your reputation would be ruined, and mine as well." "But I will die out here." Desperation gave strength to Nika's voice. "There is one way," Jack said slowly. "The Bible teaches us to avoid even the appearance of evil. If you agree to marry me by sunset tomorrow, I can offer you shelter with honor intact. Otherwise, I must send you back down the mountain." Nika stared at him, shock stealing what little warmth remained in her body. "Marry? But I don't even know you." "And I don't know you," he countered. "But I know what's right in God's eyes. 1 Thessalonians tells us to abstain from all appearance of evil. I won't have people saying I took advantage of a young woman's desperate situation." His voice softened slightly. "The choice is yours. Marriage by tomorrow's sunset, or you must find shelter elsewhere." The wind howled around the cabin's corners, as if emphasizing his words. Nika's legs trembled with exhaustion and cold. She thought of the long, dark trail behind her, of the wolves whose howls she'd heard in the distance. She thought of Eli Tanner's cold eyes, of her father's betrayal. At least this mountain man's eyes, though wary, held no cruelty. I accept your terms," she whispered. Jack nodded once, stepping back from the doorway. "Come in, then. You're half frozen." Nika stumbled across the threshold, her numb feet barely able to carry her. The cabin's warmth hit her like a physical force, making her frozen skin tingle painfully. A fire roared in a stone hearth, its light dancing across rough-hewn log walls. The single room was spare, but neat. A narrow bed in one corner, a table and 2 chairs, shelves holding books and supplies. A carved wooden cradle sat in the shadows, gathering dust. "Stand by the fire," Jack instructed, closing the door against the wind. "Your dress is soaked through." Nika moved closer to the hearth, holding her trembling hands out to the flames. The heat was almost painful against her frozen fingers. Behind her, she heard Jack moving about the cabin, boots crossing the plank floor, the clatter of iron cookware, the splash of water being poured. "You need food," he said. "I have venison stew keeping warm by the fire." The rich smell of cooking meat made Nika's empty stomach clench. She watched as Jack lifted a heavy iron pot from its hook beside the hearth, steam rising as he ladled stew into a wooden bowl. He handed it to her along with a spoon, then pulled one of the chairs closer to the fire. "Sit," he said. "Eat." Nika sank into the chair gratefully, her legs no longer able to support her. The stew was simple but hearty, chunks of venison and wild vegetables swimming in a rich broth. She forced herself to eat slowly, though hunger made her want to bolt it down. Jack sat in the other chair watching her with those keen eyes. "What's your name?" he asked finally. "Nika Yoder," she replied between careful spoonfuls of stew. "Jack Hale." He paused, then added, "Though you probably saw that on the doorpost." Nika nodded, unsure what else to say. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the crack and pop of the fire and the howl of wind outside. Her sodden skirts steamed in the heat, and feeling gradually returned to her frozen limbs. "Why did you run?" Jack asked suddenly. "The plain folk don't usually send their daughters into the wilderness alone." Nika's hands tightened around the wooden bowl. "My father," she began, then had to stop as tears threatened. She took a deep breath and tried again. "My father arranged a marriage. To a man I cannot, will not, wed." "Ah." Jack's face darkened. Would this man be Eli Tanner by any chance? Nika's head snapped up in surprise. You know of him? Everyone in these parts knows Eli Tanner. Jack's voice was grim, and his reputation. He stood abruptly, taking her empty bowl. You're safe here. Whatever your reasons, I'll honor our agreement. We'll speak more tomorrow, but now you need rest. He moved to the bed in the corner, stripping off the wool blankets. These he brought to her, along with a rough pillow. You take the bed, I'll sleep by the fire. But Nika began to protest. No arguments, Jack cut her off. You're still half frozen. The bed's warmer, away from drafts. He arranged the blankets near the hearth, then added another log to the fire. Try to sleep. Morning comes early in these mountains. Nika rose unsteadily, making her way to the bed. The straw-filled mattress was narrow but clean, the sheets smelling of sunshine and mountain air. She lay down fully clothed, pulling the remaining blankets over herself. Despite her racing thoughts, exhaustion dragged at her. Thank you, she whispered into the fire-lit darkness, for taking me in. There was a long pause before Jack replied, his voice soft. Get some sleep, Miss Yoder. Tomorrow will bring its own trials. Nika closed her eyes, listening to the wind's mournful song around the cabin's corners. She had fled one marriage arrangement only to agree to another. Yet something in her heart told her that this man, this stranger who had offered shelter with honor, was different from Eli Tanner. Whether that difference would prove to be her salvation or her downfall, only time would tell. The last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was Jack's silhouette against the dying fire, his head bowed, as if in prayer. The day passed in a strange dance of awkward courtesy. Jack spent most of it outside, checking his trap lines and bringing in more firewood, while Nika tried to make herself useful inside the cabin. She swept the rough plank floor, organized his meager collection of tin plates and cups, and mended a torn shirt she found in his mending pile. The familiar tasks helped calm her racing thoughts, though her hands trembled whenever she remembered what sunset would bring. As the winter afternoon began to fade, Jack returned with an armload of split pine logs. He stacked them carefully by the hearth, then stood for a long moment, staring into the flames. Finally, he turned to face her. It's nearly time, he said, quietly. Are you certain about this? Nika's fingers twisted in her apron. Do I have another choice? You could leave. His voice was gentle. I wouldn't stop you. Through the cabin's small window, Nika could see fresh snow falling, thick white flakes swirling in the gathering dusk. She thought of Eli Tanner's cold eyes, of the long, lonely road back to a father who would sell her like cattle. At least Jack had offered her a choice, however limited. No, she said firmly, I will stay. I will honor our agreement. Jack nodded once, then crossed to a wooden chest in the corner. He opened it, carefully, reverently lifting out something wrapped in soft cloth. When he unwrapped it, Nika saw it was a Bible, old and worn, its leather cover smooth from years of handling. My mother's, Jack said softly, running his fingers over the faded gilt letters. I swore I'd never open it again, after what happened with my brother. He fell silent, his face shadowed with old pain. Nika waited, letting him find his words. But it seems right, he continued finally, that these holy words should bind us, even without a preacher present. He moved to light several tallow candles, placing them carefully around the cabin. Their warm glow mixed with the firelight, creating pools of golden light that pushed back the gathering darkness. Outside, the wind picked up, driving snow against the window panes with a sound like thrown sand. Jack placed the Bible on the table and opened it with careful hands. The pages whispered as he turned them, searching for the right passage. Nika stood waiting, her heart thundering in her chest. This was real. This was happening. Come, Jack said quietly. Stand before God with me. Nika moved to stand beside him at the table. The candlelight caught the scar along his jaw, softening its harsh line. His hands, when he took hers, were rough with calluses, but warm and steady. "I'll speak the words first," he said, "and then you'll repeat them." His blue eyes met hers. "These are sacred vows, Nika. They bind us before God, even without earthly witness." Nika nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. Jack's voice was deep and clear as he began to read. "I, Jack Hale, take thee, Nika Yoder, to be my wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part according to God's holy ordinance. And thereto I pledge thee my faith." He looked at her expectantly. Nika took a deep breath, steadying herself. When she spoke, her voice trembled but did not waver. "I, Nika Yoder, take thee, Jack Hale, to be my wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part, according to God's holy ordinance, and thereto I pledge thee my faith." The words seemed to hang in the candlelit air, weighted with ancient power. Jack released one of her hands to turn the Bible's pages again. "The Lord God said, 'It is not good for man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him.'" Jack's voice grew softer. "Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh." He closed the Bible gently, then reached into his pocket and brought out a small, cloth-wrapped bundle. Inside was a piece of dark bread and a small portion of salt. "My mother taught me this custom," he explained, "breaking bread and sharing salt to seal a covenant." He broke the bread carefully in half, then sprinkled each piece with a pinch of salt. One piece he handed to Nika, keeping the other for himself. Together they ate the simple meal in solemn silence, their shadows dancing on the log walls as the fire popped and crackled. "Before God," Jack said when they had finished, "I declare us man and wife." Nika felt tears prick at her eyes, though she couldn't have said if they were tears of relief, fear, or some strange mixture of both. She had escaped Eli Tanner's grasp, yes, but at what cost? She was now bound to this quiet mountain man, this stranger whose past held shadows she could only guess at. Jack seemed equally affected by the moment. His hands, still holding hers, trembled slightly. His head was bowed and Nika could see his lips moving in silent prayer. Was he, like her, asking God's forgiveness for what felt like both salvation and desperation? Was he too wondering if divine lightning might strike them both for this hasty covenant? The wind rose to a howl outside, making the cabin's timbers creak. Snow pelted against the windows with increasing fury, as if nature itself was responding to their unconventional union. The temperature in the cabin had dropped as darkness fell, and Nika couldn't suppress a shiver. Jack noticed immediately. "You should rest," he said, releasing her hands. "It's been a long day, and tomorrow will bring its own challenges." He moved to bank the fire for the night, adding several large logs that would burn slowly until morning. Nika stood watching him, suddenly uncertain. They were married now, but surely he didn't expect... As if reading her thoughts, Jack spoke without turning around. "Take the bed. I'll sleep in the chair." Relief flooded through her, followed quickly by guilt. "But you're too tall for the chair. You'll be uncomfortable. I've slept in worse places." Now, he did turn, and his eyes were kind. "Go on. Get some rest." Nika retrieved her small bundle of belongings and slipped behind the privacy screen in the corner to change into her nightdress. When she emerged, Jack had settled himself in the wooden rocking chair near the fire, a wool blanket draped over his legs. The Bible lay open on his lap, though whether he was actually reading by the dying firelight, Nika couldn't tell. She climbed into the narrow bed, pulling the quilts up to her chin. The sheets were cold, but they would warm quickly enough. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but here inside the cabin was quiet, except for the pop of the fire and the gentle creak of Jack's chair. "Good night," she whispered into the darkness. "Sleep well," came his quiet reply. "You're safe here." Nika closed her eyes, trying to still her racing thoughts. In the space of 2 days, she had fled her home, her family, and one unwanted marriage, only to find herself bound in another. Yet something about Jack's gentle strength, his careful honor, gave her hope that perhaps this desperate choice might lead to something more than mere escape. As sleep began to claim her, she heard Jack's voice so soft she might have imagined it, reciting words from the psalm. "I will both lay me down in peace and sleep, for thou, Lord, only makest me dwell in safety." The deep winter silence shattered like ice. The sound of hooves crunching through snow jolted both Jack and Nika from their uneasy sleep. Jack was on his feet in an instant, moving with the fluid grace of long practice. His chair barely creaked as he rose. Nika sat up in bed, clutching the quilts to her chest. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she watched Jack retrieve his long rifle from its hooks above the fireplace. The dying embers cast just enough light to see his movements. "Stay quiet," he whispered, crossing to the window, "and stay away from the shutters." The wooden shutter made the faintest protest as Jack eased it open a crack. Outside, lantern light bobbed through the darkness like fallen stars, casting wild shadows across the snow-laden ground. 3 riders approached the cabin, their horses' breath streaming in the frigid air. "Hail!" a voice called out, sharp and demanding. "We know you're in there. Send out Tanner's bride." Jack's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, watching through the narrow gap. The riders drew closer, their lanterns illuminating faces hard with purpose beneath snow-dusted hats. "Come on out, Hale. Let's talk this through reasonable-like." Nika slipped from the bed, her bare feet silent on the wooden floor. She pressed herself against the wall beside the fireplace as far from the windows as possible. Her lips moved in silent prayer. "Dear Father in heaven, protect us." Jack turned to her, his eyes catching the last gleam of the embers. "Stay inside," he mouthed, then straightened his shoulders and moved to the door. The bitter wind swept in as Jack stepped onto the porch, rifle held low but ready. His voice carried clearly through the pre-dawn darkness. "This is my property and you're trespassing." "Now don't be hasty," the lead rider said, reining his horse to a stop. "We're just here to collect what's rightfully Mr. Tanner's. That girl in there was promised to him fair and square." "Nika is my lawful wife," Jack declared, his words ringing with quiet authority. "We spoke our vows before God last evening. She's under my roof and my protection now." Laughter, harsh and mocking, cut through the night. "A hearth wedding? Without papers or preacher?" The second rider spat into the snow. "That won't hold up nowhere, and you know it." "The Lord witnesses all true covenants," Jack replied steadily. "Now, I'm asking you kindly to leave my property." Inside, Nika pressed her hands together so tightly her fingers ached. "Lord, give him strength," she whispered. "Keep him safe." The third rider, who had remained silent until now, urged his horse forward. "Listen here, Hale. Mr. Tanner's got friends in high places, judges that'll see things his way. You really want to stand against that?" Jack didn't move an inch. His voice remained level, but there was steel beneath the words. "I've faced worse than corrupt judges, and I've had my fill of men who think money buys them whatever they want." "You're making a mistake," the lead rider warned. "This ain't over." "No," Jack agreed quietly. "I expect it isn't. But for tonight, we're done here." The silence stretched taut as a bowstring. Nika held her breath, listening to her heart pound in her ears. The horses shifted restlessly, their hooves crunching in the snow. Finally, the lead rider yanked his reins around. "Come on, boys. We'll let the law handle this." He raised his voice. "You hear that, girl? Better pack your things. When we come back, it'll be with papers that'll make this sham marriage worth less than the air you spoke it in." The riders wheeled their horses around, lanterns swaying with the motion. Their threats carried back through the darkness. Tanner always gets what he wants. Should have been sensible. Gonna regret this. Jack stood motionless on the porch until the sound of hooves faded into the night. Only then did he lower his rifle and step back inside, closing and bolting the door with careful precision. Nika hadn't moved from her place by the fireplace. She was shaking, though whether from cold or fear, she wasn't sure. "They'll be back," she whispered. "Yes." Jack moved to the fire, adding kindling and small logs until flames began to lick upward again. The growing light revealed the worry in his eyes, though his voice remained steady. "But not tonight. You're safe for now." "I'm sorry," Nika said softly. "I've brought trouble to your door." Jack straightened from the fireplace, studying her for a long moment. "Trouble was already acquainted with my door," he said finally. "And I meant what I said out there. You're my wife now by God's witness, if not man's law. I'll defend that." He crossed to a trunk in the corner and pulled out extra blankets. "Try to get some rest. Dawn's still a few hours off. And, tomorrow we'll need to plan." Nika returned to the bed, but sleep felt impossible now. She watched as Jack checked every window, every bolt. His movements were methodical, practiced, the motions of a man well versed in watching for danger. The fire crackled softly, pushing back the darkness. Outside, the wind had died down, leaving an almost unnatural silence in its wake. Nika pulled the quilts up to her chin, trying to still her trembling. "Jack," she whispered. He paused in his circuit of the cabin. "Yes?" "Thank you." For standing against them. He was quiet so long she thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice was rough with emotion he seemed unused to expressing. "Get some sleep, Nika. Whatever comes, we'll face it together." Jack settled back into his chair, rifle across his knees. The firelight caught the scar along his jaw, throwing it into sharp relief. His eyes remained fixed on the door, guardian against whatever threats the darkness might hold. Nika closed her eyes, but sleep was elusive. Her mind raced with fears of what tomorrow might bring. Eli Tanner's influence stretched far, she knew. How long could Jack's quiet strength stand against it? The fire popped and settled, sending sparks up the chimney. Outside, an owl called once, then fell silent. The night crept forward toward dawn, while inside the cabin, a man kept watch, and a woman prayed for deliverance from the storm she knew was gathering. The first rays of sunlight pierced through the cleared skies, casting a golden glow across the snow-covered landscape. The storm had passed during the night, leaving behind a pristine blanket of white that sparkled like scattered diamonds. Inside the cabin, Nika stirred at the familiar hour. Her body knew as chore time, even as her mind reminded her she was far from her family's farm. She slipped quietly from beneath the quilts, careful not to disturb Jack, who had finally dozed off in his chair near dawn. His rifle still rested across his knees, and his face, relaxed in sleep, looked younger without its usual stern expression. The wooden floor felt cold beneath her stockinged feet as she padded to the hearth. With practiced movements, she stirred the banked coals and added kindling, coaxing the fire back to life. The familiar task brought comfort. At least this hadn't changed, even if everything else in her world had turned upside down. Nika found the cornmeal in a barrel near the kitchen area, along with a cast-iron pot that had seen better days. She worked quietly, letting muscle memory guide her through the familiar routine of preparing morning mush. Add water, stir constantly, keep the heat steady. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, teaching her these simple but essential skills. A floorboard creaked, and she turned to find Jack watching her, fully awake now. His blue eyes held a mixture of surprise and something that might have been amusement. "You didn't have to do that," he said, setting his rifle carefully in its place above the hearth. "I'm used to rising early," Nika replied, continuing to stir the thickening mush. "And everyone needs breakfast." Jack moved to the water barrel, dipping a tin cup. Most mornings I just grab whatever's left from the night before. That's no proper way to start a day, Nika said, before she could stop herself. Then she blushed, remembering this was his home, not hers to judge. But Jack only chuckled, a rough sound like he didn't use it often. Reckon you're right about that. He watched her work for a moment. You're good at this, the cooking and such. Mama taught all us girls young. Nika tested the mush with a wooden spoon. It's ready now if you're hungry. They ate in silence at first, seated on opposite sides of the small table. The quiet wasn't entirely uncomfortable, but Nika felt the weight of all the questions between them. Finally, gathering her courage, she spoke softly. May I ask, what brought you up here? To live alone in the mountains? Jack stared into his bowl for a long moment. When he looked up, his eyes were distant, seeing something far beyond the cabin walls. Used to ride guard for the silver shipments, he said finally. Down from the mines to Denver. Good money, but dangerous work. Had to be fast with a gun. He paused, working his jaw. Too fast, maybe. Nika waited somehow, knowing he needed to tell this story at his own pace. There was a raid. 5 men trying to take the wagon, in the firefight. He stopped, his hand unconsciously touching the scar on his jaw. I killed a man. Found out later he had a wife, children. He wasn't even one of the raiders, just a traveler who got caught in the wrong place. I'm sorry, Nika whispered. Jack nodded slowly. Swore after that I'd never draw in anger again. Came up here, where the only thing I had to shoot was game for the pot. His lips twisted in a bitter smile. Thought I could leave the violence behind, but seems it follows a man. The Lord can heal any wound, Nika said softly. If we let him... Maybe. Jack pushed back from the table. But sometimes the scars remain. Nika began clearing the bowls, thinking about scars, both visible and hidden, and the way they shaped a life. She started humming as she worked, an old hymn her grandmother had taught her about grace and redemption. What's that tune? Jack asked, pausing in the act of pulling on his heavy coat. 'Tis a gift to be simple, Nika answered. Would you like to learn it? Jack hesitated, then nodded. Nika sang the words softly, her clear voice filling the cabin with warmth. 'Tis a gift to be simple. 'Tis a gift to be free. 'Tis a gift to come down where we ought to be. She taught him the melody line by line, smiling at his earnest attempts to match the notes. His voice was rough and unpracticed, but he tried with the same quiet determination he seemed to bring to everything. Need to get more wood split, he said finally, reaching for his axe. Winter's far from over. Through the window, Nika watched him work in the crisp morning air. His breath steamed as he swung the axe, and she could hear him humming her hymn, slightly off-key but sincere. The sound made something warm unfurl in her chest, a feeling of home, however temporary this shelter might be. But the warmth faded as she remembered the riders from the night before and Eli Tanner's far-reaching influence. She'd seen how the cattle baron operated, how he used money and threats to bend people to his will. Even here, in this peaceful morning, she couldn't escape the knowledge that he would come for her again. Jack came back inside, stamping snow from his boots. He must have read the worry in her face because he said, "Been thinking. We should ride into town in a few days, once the snow's packed down some." Town? Nika felt her chest tighten with fear. But Tanner's men... Need supplies anyway, Jack said, hanging up his coat. And while we're there, we can see the preacher. Get our marriage properly blessed and recorded. He met her eyes steadily. Might not stop Tanner completely, but it'll give us firmer ground to stand on. Nika nodded slowly, understanding the wisdom in his words, even as anxiety fluttered in her stomach. How far is town? Half-day's ride, weather permitting. Jack began stacking the split wood near the hearth. Figure we can stay at the Widow Carson's boarding house. She's a good woman, won't turn us away. See the preacher next morning, get what supplies we need, and be back here before dark. His calm practicality helped settle her nerves. This was a plan, a way forward, and perhaps having their marriage properly blessed would ease some of the guilt she felt about their hasty ceremony. I'll need to make some preparations, she said, mentally listing what needed to be done. Bread baked for the journey, clothes mended. Jack's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. Reckon you'll have this place running proper before long. If you don't mind, Nika asked hesitantly. I know I'm here by necessity, not choice. No, Jack interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. You're here because I chose to help you and you chose to accept the terms. Whatever brought us to this point, we're joined now. Might as well make the best of it. Nika felt tears prick at her eyes, touched by his gruff kindness. Thank you. Jack looked uncomfortable with her emotion, turning back to his wood stacking. But she heard him humming her hymn again as he worked, and somehow that said more than words could have. The morning wore on, settling into a rhythm of small tasks and shared spaces. They moved around each other carefully, like dancers learning new steps, each conscious of the other's presence but trying not to intrude. Yet already there was a fragile comfort growing between them, born of necessity but nurtured by mutual respect. Through the window, the sun climbed higher in the crystal-clear sky, making the snow-covered wilderness gleam. It was beautiful and peaceful this morning after the storm. But like Jack and Nika both knew, peace could be fleeting. Somewhere beyond these mountains, Eli Tanner was surely already setting plans in motion. For now, though, there was wood to stack, bread to bake, and a new hymn being learned in an off-key hum. Small moments of grace, building something that might, with time and trust, become strong enough to weather whatever storms were gathering. 2 days passed in a gentle rhythm of domestic tasks and careful conversations before the snow packed down enough for travel. The morning dawned clear and cold, their breath hanging in clouds as Jack hitched his sturdy mule to a wooden sled. He'd lined the bed with fresh straw and warm buffalo robes. Here, Jack said, holding out a bundle of furs to Nika. These'll keep you warm on the ride. Nika touched the soft pelts with wonder. They're beautiful. Trapped them myself, Jack replied, helping her wrap the heaviest around her shoulders. His hands were gentle but quick, tucking the edges secure against the wind. It's a fair piece to town and the air's got a bite today. The mule stomped impatiently, its harness bells jingling in the crisp morning air. Jack checked the traces one final time before helping Nika settle into the sled. He climbed in beside her, taking up the reins. Ready? He asked. Nika nodded, though her stomach fluttered with nerves. She hadn't seen a town since fleeing her home, and the thought of facing strangers. Eyes made her anxious, but Jack's solid presence beside her gave her courage. The sled glided smoothly over the packed snow, runners creaking softly. Jack guided them down from the mountain heights along a winding trail. Nika watched the landscape change as they descended, the stark pines giving way to shorter brush, the snow thinning in patches where the sun struck strongest. After several hours, they crested a rise, and the town spread before them in the valley below. Nika caught her breath at the sight. It wasn't large, perhaps 30 buildings in all, but after the isolation of Jack's cabin, it seemed bustling with life. Welcome to Silver Creek, Jack said quietly. As they drew closer, and the sounds of town life grew clearer, a blacksmith's hammer rang against iron, the steady clicks echoing off the surrounding hills. Wagon wheels creaked as teams hauled loads of timber and ore. Children's laughter carried from where they played in the street, having a snowball fight near the schoolhouse. Jack guided the sled down the main street at an unhurried pace. Nika felt the weight of curious stares. Her plain dress and prayer bonnet marked her as distinctly different, especially next to Jack's rugged mountain man appearance. She kept her eyes lowered, but couldn't help hearing the whispers that followed their passage. That's Jack Hale. With an Amish girl? Heard she ran from living up in his cabin. Jack's jaw tightened, but he gave no other sign he heard the gossip. He drew the sled to a halt in front of the mercantile, its windows displaying bright calicos and tin goods. "Need to trade some pelts," he said, helping her down. "Might as well get your shopping done, too." The store bell tinkled as they entered. The interior was warm and dim, smelling of coffee beans and leather. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, packed with everything from nails to preserved fruits. The proprietor, a thin man with spectacles, looked up from his ledger. "Jack Hale," he said, nodding. "Been a while." "Mr. Peters." Jack placed his bundle of furs on the counter. "Got some prime beaver and fox here." While the men haggled over the pelts, Nika moved through the store, selecting what they needed. Flour, salt, thread for mending, a new lamp wick. She was examining a bolt of sturdy muslin when she overheard two women speaking in low voices near the soap display. Poor thing, probably didn't have a choice. These mountain men, taking whatever they can get. Heard she traded herself for shelter. In winter, what else could she do? Still living alone with him up there. Nika's cheeks burned, but she kept her movements steady, selecting the fabric she needed. She saw Jack's shoulders stiffen. He'd heard too. His hand clenched on the counter and she feared he might confront the gossips. Quickly, she touched his arm. "Jack, could you help me reach that top shelf?" Her voice was soft but clear enough to carry. He turned to her, the anger in his eyes softening as she met his gaze steadily. After a moment, he nodded, reaching up to get the tin of baking powder she'd pointed to. "Much obliged," she said, letting her fingers rest briefly on his sleeve. The tension slowly eased from his frame. They completed their trading and stepped back into the sharp, winter air. Jack loaded their purchases into the sled while Nika adjusted her bonnet against the wind. "One more stop," he said quietly. The church. The little clapboard building stood at the end of the street, its white paint gleaming in the afternoon sun. A simple cross adorned the steep roof, and smoke curled from the chimney. Jack tied the mule at the hitching post, and they climbed the steps together. Inside, the church was plain but well kept. Wooden pews lined the central aisle, and a pot-bellied stove radiated welcome warmth. At the sound of their entrance, a door near the pulpit opened, and Reverend Josiah Tully emerged. The preacher was a tall man with kind eyes and gray threading his dark hair. He smiled warmly as he approached them. "Jack Hale," he said, extending his hand. "It's been too long since you've graced these pews." His gaze moved to Nika, including her in his welcome. "And, this must be the young lady I've heard about." "Reverend?" Jack shook his hand. "This is Nika. We've come to speak with you about marriage formalities." "Ah." The preacher's expression grew thoughtful. "Perhaps we should sit." He gestured to the front pew. Once they were settled, Reverend Tully folded his hands in his lap. "I should tell you, Eli Tanner came to see me 2 days ago. He claims there's a prior arrangement for the young lady's hand." Nika felt her heart skip, but she kept her voice steady. "There was no true arrangement, Reverend. Only my father's word, given under pressure, without my consent." "I see." The preacher studied her face carefully. "And now? You're married to Jack?" "Before God and by our own words," Jack said. "But we want to make it proper in the church's eyes, too." Reverend Tully nodded slowly. "Marriage is a sacred covenant, not to be entered into lightly, but it's also a matter of free will and true hearts." He leaned forward slightly. "Tell me honestly, did you enter this union of your own choice, Miss Nika?" Nika met his gaze directly. "I chose to accept Jack's terms when he offered me shelter. And though it began in haste, I choose now to honor those vows with a willing heart." The preacher's eyes warmed with approval. "Well said." He turned to Jack. "And you, my friend? What are your intentions toward this young woman?" "To protect her," Jack said simply. to provide a home and treat her with respect, to be a proper husband in the eyes of God and man. Good answers, both of you. Reverend Tully stood. I'll need to speak with each of you separately, and there are proper forms to complete, but I see no reason why we can't formalize your union properly. His expression grew serious. Though I warn you, Tanner isn't likely to accept this easily. He has influence with the territorial judges. We understand, Jack said quietly. But we'll face that when it comes. The preacher nodded. Very well, come back tomorrow morning and we'll begin the proper proceedings. He smiled at Nika. Perhaps you'd like to stay at Widow Carson's boarding house tonight? She's a good woman, discreet and kind. Thank you, Reverend Nika said softly. For everything. Outside, the winter sun was sinking toward the mountains, painting the snow in shades of rose and gold. As Jack helped Nika back into the sled, she noticed fewer people watched them now. Perhaps the town's curiosity was satisfied, or perhaps they had shown enough dignity in the face of gossip to earn a measure of respect. Jack wrapped the furs around her against the gathering evening chill. His hands lingered a moment longer than necessary, and Nika felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the heavy pelts. Widow Carson's is just down the side street, he said, taking up the reins. We'll get you settled there for the night. The mules' harness bells chimed softly as they moved through the deepening dusk toward whatever tomorrow might bring. The journey back to the cabin was quiet, broken only by the soft crunch of snow beneath the mules' hooves. Winter's early darkness had settled over the mountain, and Jack kept a careful eye on the trail ahead. When they finally reached the clearing, smoke still curled from the chimney. The banked fire had held. Inside, Jack quickly built up the flames while Nika unpacked their supplies. The familiar scent of wood smoke filled the cabin as she set about preparing their evening meal. Soon, the homey aroma of simmering beans and salt pork joined it, making the small space feel more like home than it had just days before. They sat together at the rough-hewn table, the lantern's glow casting warm shadows on the log walls. For a while, there was only the quiet sounds of spoons against tin plates. Jack broke the silence first. I want to thank you, he said, his voice low, for what you did at the mercantile today. Nika looked up from her plate. When those women were speaking? Yes. His jaw tightened at the memory. I nearly lost my temper. Wanted to set them straight about. He trailed off, then continued more quietly. About us. Violence would not have helped, Nika said softly. My people believe in turning the other cheek. We are taught to forgive 70 times 7. Your Amish ways, Jack said. Tell me more about them. Nika's hands folded in her lap. We live simply. Work hard. Put our faith in God above all else. She hesitated. But I must confess something, Jack. I am frightened. Her voice trembled slightly. Not of you, but of what may come. Of Tanner and his influence. Jack's expression softened. You've shown more courage than most men I know, facing down those town gossips today. It is one thing to face words, she said. But Tanner... She shook her head. I have seen the hardness in his eyes. Jack was quiet for a long moment. His gaze drifted to the corner of the cabin where something lay draped in shadows. Rising from the table, he walked over and pulled away a cloth cover, revealing a beautifully carved cradle. Nika's breath caught at the craftsmanship, the delicate curves, the carefully worked wood. But there was pain in Jack's eyes as he ran his hand along its edge. I made this, he said, his voice rough. 5 years ago. For Sarah. He swallowed hard. She was to be my wife. We had it all planned out. The wedding, the home we'd build, the family we'd raise. What happened? Nika asked gently. Fever took her. His voice broke. 3 weeks before our wedding day. I couldn't. He drew a shuddering breath. Couldn't bear to look at this after. But I couldn't bring myself to burn it either. Nika rose from her chair and moved to stand beside him. Slowly, carefully, she placed her hand over his where it rested on the cradle. "God gives second chances," she whispered. "Perhaps that is why he led me to your door." Jack's fingers trembled beneath hers, then slowly turned to clasp her hand. They stood that way for a long moment, the cradle between them while the fire crackled softly in the hearth. Finally, Jack straightened, though he kept hold of her hand. "Come with me," he said. "There's something I need to show you." He led her to where his long rifle stood in its corner. Taking it down, he checked that it was unloaded before holding it out to her. Nika drew back slightly. "I have never touched a weapon." "I pray you'll never need to," Jack said. "But if something happens to me, you must know how to defend yourself." "Jack, please," he said quietly. "For my peace of mind, if nothing else." Slowly, Nika reached out and took the rifle. It was heavier than she expected. Jack positioned himself behind her, showing her how to hold it properly. "Like this," he said, adjusting her grip. "Support it here, against your shoulder." His hands were gentle as he guided her. "Sight along the barrel. See that notch at the end?" Nika nodded, trying to focus on his instructions rather than his nearness, the warmth of his breath against her ear. "You don't have to be perfect," he continued. "Just able to make enough noise to scare off trouble. And if it comes to it." He hesitated. "Well, we'll pray it doesn't." They spent some time practicing how to load and unload the weapon safely, how to clean it, where Jack kept the powder, and shot. By the time they finished, Nika's arms ached from the rifle's weight, but she felt more confident in handling it. "Thank you," she said, as Jack returned the weapon to its corner. "For trusting me with this. Thank you for being willing to learn." He paused, then asked, Would you read with me?" "From the good book?" Nika's face brightened. "I would like that very much." Jack retrieved the worn family Bible from its shelf. They settled together near the fire, and he opened to the Psalms. His voice was rough, but reverent as he began to read. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." Nika's clear voice joined his on the familiar words. "He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters." Together, they read until the fire burned. Lo, finding comfort in the ancient words of faith and protection. When Jack finally closed the Bible, something had shifted between them, a deeper trust, a growing understanding. Neither spoke of it directly, but as they prepared for sleep, Jack to his chair, Nika to her quilts, the cabin felt more like a home than it had before. The cradle in the corner no longer seemed a symbol of loss, but of possibility. And though danger still waited beyond their door, they faced them now not as strangers bound by desperate circumstance, but as two souls beginning to find their way together. The night wind sang through the pines outside, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf called to its mate. Inside the cabin, the fire's embers cast a gentle glow, and peace settled over them like a blanket. The morning sun had barely cleared the mountain peaks when a hard rap echoed through the cabin. Jack, who had been stoking the breakfast fire, straightened immediately. His eyes met Nika's across the room, where she stood kneading bread dough at the rough wooden table. The knock came again, more insistent this time. "Sheriff's office!" "Open up, Hale." Jack moved toward the door, his steps measured and calm. He gestured for Nika to stay back, though she had already pressed herself against the far wall, her flour-dusted hands clasped tightly at her chest. The worn floorboards creaked beneath Jack's boots as he reached for the door latch. Sheriff Abel Rusk stood on the snow-packed porch, flanked by two deputies. Their badges gleamed dully in the winter light. Behind them, 3 horses stamped restlessly, their breath forming clouds in the cold air. The sheriff's expression was a practiced mask of official authority, but his eyes held a calculating gleam that spoke of coin rather than justice. "Morning, Jack," Rusk said, adjusting his hat with one gloved hand. "Got some business to attend to." "Sheriff?" Jack's greeting was cordial, but cool. He filled the doorway with his broad frame, neither stepping back nor inviting them in. Rusk reached into his coat and withdrew a folded document, its official seal visible even in the wan morning light. "Got here a legal summons," he announced, holding it out. "Concerning the matter of one Veronica Yoder and her current situation?" Jack took the paper with steady hands, though his jaw tightened as he unfolded it. The document was filled with formal language, but its meaning was clear enough. Nika's marriage to Jack was being declared invalid. No preacher present, no witnesses to the vows, no proper documentation filed with the territorial authorities. The paper bore Judge Harrison's signature at the bottom, alongside Eli Tanner's bold scrawl. "This here order," Rusk continued, "states that any claim of marriage between you and Miss Yoder is null and void under territorial law. She's to be returned to her rightful guardian immediately." "Rightful guardian?" Jack's voice was quiet but carried an edge. "She's a grown woman, Sheriff, not a lost child." "Law's the law, Hale." Rusk shrugged, as if the matter were out of his hands. "Mr. Tanner has a prior claim through her father's agreement. You know how these things work." "I know how money works, Sheriff." Jack's words carried just enough weight to make Rusk's eyes narrow. "And I know whose gold lines, whose pockets in this territory." One of the deputies shifted his hand to rest near his gun belt, but Rusk held up a staying hand. "Now, let's not make this difficult. Where is the girl?" "My wife," Jack corrected firmly, "is here with me, where she chooses to be." At that moment, Nika stepped forward into view, though she kept one hand on Jack's arm. Her face was pale but composed, her voice steady as she spoke. "I am Jack Hale's wife before God and my own conscience, Sheriff Rusk. I will not be handed over like cattle at auction." The sheriff's practiced smile didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Yoder, I'm afraid your emotional decisions don't override the law. Mr. Tanner has legitimate documentation of prior claim, and your father's sworn statement besides. The only claim that matters is her own free will," Jack said. His voice remained level, but there was steel beneath the words. "We'll appear before the town council when summoned, Sheriff. We'll speak our piece there. But Nika stays here, under my protection." Rusk studied them both for a long moment, weighing options behind his calculating eyes. Finally, he stepped back, adjusting his gun belt with deliberate casualness. "Have it your way for now, Hale. But this paper says what it says. Council meets next week. Don't make me come back here with more men." The threat hung in the air like wood smoke as the sheriff and his deputies mounted up. Jack stood in the doorway, watching until they disappeared down the snow-covered trail. Only then did he close the door, his shoulders sagging slightly as he turned to face Nika. She still gripped his arm, her fingers trembling now that the immediate danger had passed. "They will come back," she whispered. "With more men, like he said. With guns." Her eyes searched his face. "Will you fight them, Jack?" "With weapons?" Jack gently covered her hand with his own. "No, little dove. I made a vow years ago. No more killing. That path leads only to more darkness." He looked down at the summons still clutched in his other hand. "We'll fight this with truth and faith. Sometimes those are stronger weapons than any gun." Nika's grip on his arm relaxed slightly, though worry still creased her brow. "What can we do?" "We prepare," Jack said simply. "Not with bullets, but with wisdom." He moved to the window, studying the winter landscape beyond. "The cabin needs strengthening. We'll reinforce the shutters first, then stack more wood inside. Winter's far from over, and we may need to weather more than just snow." They spent the rest of the morning working side by side. Jack showed Nika how to help him brace the window shutters with extra boards, making them sturdy enough to withstand more than just wind. His hands were gentle as he guided her in handling the tools, teaching her the proper way to drive. Nails and check the wood's strength. Like this, she asked, testing a shutter's movement. That's right, he nodded approvingly. Firm, but not too tight. Needs to close quick and solid if trouble comes. As the sun climbed higher, they turned their attention to the woodpile. Jack split logs with steady, powerful strokes, while Nika stacked them inside along the cabin's walls. The physical labor helped keep their minds from dwelling too much on the sheriff's visit, though neither could entirely forget the threat that hung over them. During a brief rest, while sharing water from a tin cup, Nika spoke softly. "My father." She hesitated, then continued. "He always taught us that God's law stands above man's law. That when the two conflict, we must follow our conscience and accept the consequences." Jack studied her face, noting the strength beneath her gentle features. "Your father sounds like a wise man, despite his agreement with Tanner." "He is," Nika said, a touch of sadness in her voice. "But he is also proud, and sometimes pride can blind even the wisest eyes." She handed the cup back to Jack, their fingers brushing. "I pray he will understand in time that I could not submit to being sold like property." "We'll pray for that together," Jack said quietly. He set the cup aside and reached for another log. "For now, we prepare and trust in the Lord's guidance." They worked through the afternoon, the rhythm of their labor creating a kind of peace despite their circumstances. Jack taught Nika other practical skills: how to bar the door quickly, which floorboards could hide small valuables, the safest route down the mountain if she ever needed to flee alone. She absorbed it all with quiet determination, though they both prayed such knowledge would never be needed. As evening approached, they had transformed the cabin into a more defensible shelter. Extra wood was stacked neatly along the walls, shutters moved smoothly on reinforced hinges, and essential supplies were organized for quick access. Jack had even shown Nika a small hidden space beneath the floorboards, where he kept emergency provisions and a few precious documents. They shared a simple supper of cornbread and beans, letting the familiar routine of the meal bring some normalcy back to their day. The summons lay on a shelf nearby, its official seal a constant reminder of the challenges ahead. But as they sat together in the gathering dusk, there was also a sense of strength in their unity, a shared resolve that went deeper than mere legal papers could touch. "Whatever comes," Jack said quietly, "we face it together. With truth and faith. Like I promised." Nika reached across the table and took his hand. "Together," she agreed, her voice soft but unwavering. "In God's eyes, we are already bound. No man's law can break that bond." Outside, the wind picked up, rattling their newly reinforced shutters. But inside the cabin, despite the threat of what tomorrow might bring, there was warmth and certainty in their shared conviction. They had chosen their path, and they would walk it side by side, trusting in a higher justice than any territorial court could provide. The days crept by like molasses in winter. Each morning, Jack and Nika rose before dawn, their breaths forming small clouds in the cold cabin air. Though worry gnawed at their hearts, they found purpose in teaching each other the skills needed to survive. "Watch how I set this snare," Jack demonstrated, his calloused hands working the thin wire with surprising delicacy. "The rabbit will come through here, following its own trail." Nika knelt beside him in the snow, her dark skirts gathered close, studying his movements with keen attention. Later that same day, Jack guided her across the deep drifts on wooden snowshoes. "Small steps," he instructed, steadying her with a gentle hand when she stumbled. "Let the shoe do the work." Nika's determination showed in her furrowed brow as she mastered the awkward movement. By the woodpile, Jack taught her to swing an axe safely. "Keep your feet apart," he said, positioning her hands on the handle. "Let the weight of the head do the cutting." Nika's first few swings were tentative, but soon she found her rhythm, the satisfying thunk of splitting wood bringing a smile to her face. In return, Nika shared her own wisdom. In the evening lamplight, she showed Jack how to thread a needle and make the tiny, even stitches her people were known for. "Like this," she said softly, guiding his rough fingers. "Each stitch a prayer for the one who will wear it." Their daily routines began to mesh like well-oiled gears. While Nika's bread rose in its pan, filling the cabin with the promise of sustenance, Jack trudged through snow to the creek, returning with buckets of crystal-clear water. They moved around each other with growing ease, learning the dance of shared space. One evening, as darkness fell, a commotion erupted from the henhouse. Without hesitation, Nika grabbed the lantern and rushed out. Jack reached for his rifle but stopped short, watching in amazement as she confronted the marauding fox, swinging the light and shouting in Pennsylvania Dutch until the creature fled into the night. "That was mighty brave," Jack said when she returned, cheeks flushed with cold and victory. Nika ducked her head at his praise, but her eyes shone with pride. That night, they sat closer than usual by the hearth, the firelight painting their faces in warm hues. The usual talk of threats and preparations fell away, replaced by softer words about hope and possibility. "I never thought a marriage of necessity could feel like this," Nika admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack's hand found hers in the flickering light. "Perhaps necessity just opened the door," he said. "What comes after? That's up to us." They sat in companionable silence, watching the flames dance, their joined hands a bridge between past and future, between what had to be and what might yet become. The morning dawned heavy and gray, a thick blanket of clouds pressing down on the mountain peaks. Jack stood at the cabin window, coffee cup, cooling in his hand, watching as the first snowflakes began to drift down. Something in the air felt different, a tension that made the hairs on his neck rise like before a storm. Nika was at the table, mending one of his shirts with her precise stitches, when the sound of wheels crunching through frozen snow reached them. Jack's body stiffened. Through the frosted window, he spotted an elegant black carriage approaching, flanked by 4 mounted men. "It's Tanner," he said quietly, setting down his cup. "Stay inside." But Nika rose, laying aside her sewing. "No," she said firmly. "We face him together." The carriage halted in the yard, its polished surface gleaming, even in the dull morning light. Eli Tanner stepped down, his expensive boots sinking into the snow. He cut an imposing figure in his fine wool coat and beaver hat, every inch the wealthy cattle baron. His ranch hands spread out behind him, rifles clearly visible across their saddles. Jack moved to the door, placing himself squarely in the entrance as heavy footsteps mounted the porch stairs. Nika stood just behind his shoulder, her presence steady and sure. Tanner's fist hammered against the doorframe. "Open up, Hale. I know you're in there with what's mine." Jack planted his feet wider. "Nothing here belongs to you, Tanner." "The hell it doesn't?" Tanner thrust a folded paper toward Jack's face. "I have right here a signed agreement with Abraham Yoder, giving his daughter's hand to me. It's legal and binding." The document crackled in the cold air as Tanner waved it. Jack could see the formal script, the official stamps, but his expression remained stone. "A father can't give what isn't his to give," Jack said evenly. "Nika's a grown woman who made her choice." Tanner's face darkened. "Choice? You forced her into this sham marriage to steal her from me? Everyone knows you're nothing but a killer hiding in these mountains. What kind of choice is that?" Before Jack could respond, Nika stepped forward. Her plain dress and prayer cap stood in stark contrast to Tanner's finery, but her spine was straight as steel. Though her hands trembled slightly, her voice rang clear across the porch. "I chose Jack freely," she declared. "Before God and these witnesses, I say it plain. I am Jack Hale's wife by my own will." Tanner's eyes narrowed dangerously. You don't know what you're saying, girl. Your father raised you better than to throw yourself away on some mountain man. Come with me now and we'll forget this foolishness. My father raised me to follow God's leading, Nika replied, and God led me here to Jack's door and Jack's heart. That is my truth. A muscle twitched in Tanner's jaw. He looked from Nika to Jack, then to his men waiting in the yard. For a moment, the tension crackled like lightning about to strike. You think this is over? Tanner sneered, crushing the paper in his fist. I've got lawyers in Denver who'll tear apart your firelight wedding. No witnesses, no preacher, no license. It won't stand up in any court. I'll see you both ruined. He jabbed, a finger at Jack. You'll lose everything. This land, this cabin, whatever reputation you have left. And you, he turned to Nika. You'll learn what happens to women who defy their rightful place. Jack's hand tightened on the doorframe, but he held his peace, letting Nika's truth stand between them like a shield. Tanner spun on his heel and stormed down the steps. Snow flew from his boots as he strode to his carriage. Mark my words, he called back. This isn't finished. They watched as the carriage turned around, the horses' hooves churning up the pristine snow. The mounted men followed, their rifles still ready, until the whole group disappeared around the bend. As soon as they were gone, Nika's strength seemed to leave her. Her knees buckled, and she sagged against Jack's chest. He caught her, strong arms wrapping around her shoulders, holding her close as she trembled. You did well, he murmured into her hair. So well, my brave one. Nika pressed her face into his shirt, her words muffled. I was so afraid. But I couldn't let him think I was forced. Couldn't let him soil what we have with his lies. Jack guided her to the chair by the fire, kneeling beside her. The morning light filtered through the windows, catching the silver threads in her prayer cap. He took her small hands in his, marveling at their strength. Truth is, he said slowly, I haven't bent my knee to God since my brother died. Thought he'd abandoned me out here in the wilderness. He paused, searching for words. But seeing you stand there, speaking your truth without fear, I felt something stir in my heart, something I thought was dead. Nika's eyes shone with unshed tears. Faith can sleep, like seeds under snow, but it never truly dies if there's love to wake it. Jack bowed his head, pressing her hands to his forehead in a gesture of profound gratitude. For the first time in years, words of prayer rose naturally to his lips, not the formal phrases of his youth, but simple thanks for the woman before him, for her courage, for the chance at redemption she represented. They sat together as the morning wore on, the fire crackling softly, snow falling outside the windows. The threat of Tanner's return hung over them like the heavy clouds, but they had faced him together and found themselves stronger for it. Whatever storms approached, they would weather them as one, in faith, in truth, and in the growing love that neither force nor law could deny. The morning bell of the clapboard church rang out across the snow-covered town, its clear tone drawing townsfolk from their homes and shops. Jack guided the mule-drawn sled carefully through the rutted street, his arm protective around Nika as they approached the gathering. Her plain black bonnet stood stark against the white landscape, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The church steps had been swept clean of snow, but patches of ice still gleamed treacherously in the weak winter sunlight. Jack helped Nika down from the sled, steadying her careful steps. Before they could reach the door, Sheriff Rusk emerged, his badge catching the light. "Counsel's waiting," he said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. "Quite a crowd inside." Jack nodded curtly, keeping Nika close as they entered. The interior of the church was indeed packed. Farmers in their Sunday coats, merchants from the street shops, ranchers still wearing their work clothes. The air was thick with the smell of wool and wood smoke, and dozens of eyes followed their progress down the narrow aisle. At the front, before the simple wooden altar, sat the town council, 5 men including Reverend Tully, who occupied the center chair. To one side stood Eli Tanner, resplendent in an expensive Eastern suit, his lawyer, beside him with a stack of papers. The contrast between Tanner's finery and Jack's worn buckskins couldn't have been starker. "Let us begin," Reverend Tully announced, his deep voice carrying to the back pews. "We are gathered to address the matter of marriage claims regarding Miss Nika Yoder." "Mrs. Hale," Jack corrected firmly, though respectfully. A few titters ran through the crowd. Tanner stepped forward, boots clicking on the wooden floor. "There is no Mrs. Hale, Reverend, only a frightened girl held captive by a mountain hermit who forced her into a false ceremony." "That's a lie," Nika said, her quiet voice somehow carrying through the church. Several people shifted uncomfortably. It wasn't common for women to speak in such proceedings. Tanner's lawyer cleared his throat. "We have here a formal contract of betrothal, signed by Abraham Yoder giving his daughter's hand to Mr. Tanner. It includes a substantial bride price already paid." He held up a document heavy with official seals. "A father cannot sell what isn't his," Jack stated, his voice level but firm. "Nika came to my door of her own free will, fleeing a forced marriage. We spoke our vows before God, sharing bread and salt, reading from Scripture." A harsh laugh came from the crowd. "Since when does Jack Hale care about Scripture?" someone called out. "Ain't you the one who killed them men up in mining country?" "Coward hiding in the hills, that's all he is," another voice joined in. Sheriff Rusk stepped forward, thumbs hooked in his belt. "Way I hear it, you wouldn't even be up in the mountains if you hadn't run from justice yourself. What kind of man are you to speak of God's law?" The crowd grew restless, more voices joining the criticism. Jack stood straight, refusing to react to the taunts, though Nika could feel the tension in his arm where she held it. "Order," Reverend Tully called out, rising from his chair. "This is God's house, and we will conduct ourselves accordingly." The noise subsided, though hostile murmurs still rippled through the gathering. Tanner seized the moment to press his advantage. "Reverend, the law is clear," he proclaimed. "A proper marriage requires witnesses, a licensed official, and proper documentation. This so-called hearth wedding is nothing but backwoods superstition. The girl remains my betrothed under law and contract. The law of man, perhaps," Jack responded, his voice carrying the quiet strength that had first drawn Nika to trust him. "But we made our vows before a higher court. In the wilderness, when no preacher can be found, two believers may still join before God in honest covenant." "Honest?" Tanner scoffed. "You forced her to marry you for shelter. What kind of choice is that?" "I chose freely," Nika spoke again, stepping slightly forward. Her voice trembled, but did not break. "I chose Jack's honor over your wealth, mister." Tanner: "I chose his kindness over your ownership, and I choose him still." A soft susurration went through the crowd, some sympathetic, others scandalized. Reverend Tully raised his hand for silence, his weathered face thoughtful. "The matter before us is not simple," he began slowly. "Under territorial law, mister, Tanner's claim has merit. A father's contract and a witnessed betrothal carry legal weight." He paused, looking directly at Jack and Nika. "However, as a minister of God's word, I cannot discount the significance of vows made in earnest before the Almighty, even without earthly witness." "Surely you're not suggesting this farce is valid," Tanner's lawyer protested. "I'm suggesting that matters of the heart and soul cannot always be bound by paper and ink," Tully replied firmly. "Throughout Scripture, we see God honoring sincere commitment over mere legality. When Ruth pledged herself to Naomi's people, there was no contract. When Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, there was no witness but heaven." "This is absurd," Tanner burst out. "We're not living in biblical times. There are laws, procedures." "Indeed there are," Tully cut in. "And this council must consider them carefully. But we must also consider the spiritual weight of vows spoken before God and the conscience of a woman who has clearly stated her choice." Sheriff Rusk stepped forward again. "Reverend, you can't mean to validate this mockery of proper order. Think of the precedent it would set." The other council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, exchanging glances. One of them, a merchant named Harrison, cleared his throat. "Perhaps." Perhaps we need more time to consider all aspects of this case, he suggested. It's not a matter to be decided hastily. Agreed, said another council member, nodding. There are both legal and moral considerations to weigh. Tanner's face darkened with fury. There's nothing to consider. Either marriage law means something, or we might as well let every mountain man steal whatever woman he wants. Nobody stole me, Nika's clear voice rang out. I went to Jack of my own will, and I stay with him the same way. A woman in the crowd called out, Yeri, let them be. The girls made her choice plain enough. Silence, Reverend Tully commanded. He surveyed the packed church for a long moment before speaking again. This council will take time to pray and deliberate on this matter. Until we reach a decision, the current situation will remain unchanged. You mean you'll leave her with him? Tanner demanded incredulously. I mean, we will not forcibly separate those who believe themselves joined before God without most serious consideration, Tully replied firmly. This meeting is adjourned until further notice. The crowd erupted in conversation as people began to move. Some pushed forward to speak with council members. Others gathered in knots to discuss what they'd witnessed. Jack felt Nika's hand tighten on his arm and understood her silent signal. Without waiting for a more confrontation, they made their way down the side aisle toward the door. Behind them, they could hear the buzz of competing opinions. Tanner's right. Can't have people claiming marriage without proper procedure. But the girl clearly wants to stay with Hale. Times like these, maybe God's law matters more than man's. Outside in the cold air, Jack helped Nika into the sled and wrapped the buffalo robe around her shoulders. As he took up the reins, he saw Reverend Tully watching from the church steps. The older man gave them a slight nod, not quite approval, but something like understanding. The mule's hooves crunched through the snow as they started the long ride home. Neither Jack nor Nika spoke for several minutes, each lost in thought about what had transpired. Finally, Nika broke the silence. They didn't declare our marriage void, she said softly. That's something to be thankful for. Jack nodded, his eyes on the snowy trail ahead. Reverend Tully is a good man. He sees past Tanner's money to what's right. But the waiting will be hard, Nika added, moving closer to Jack's warmth. Not knowing what they'll decide. We know what matters, Jack replied, his voice gentle but firm. Whatever they decide about paper and law, our vows before God stand true. Around them, the winter landscape stretched white and silent, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the snow. They had won no final victory, but neither had they lost. For now, they had each other, their faith, and hope that truth would eventually prevail over power. The sled continued up the mountain trail, carrying them back to the cabin that had become their sanctuary. Behind them, the town grew small in the distance, its church steeple standing straight against the pale sky, while before them lay the wilderness where they had found each other and made their stand for love over law. The journey back to their cabin had been long and silent. Both Jack and Nika lost in thought about the morning's events at the church. As they approached their home in the late afternoon, the sun already dropping behind the mountain peaks, Nika straightened her shoulders with determination. We cannot let fear rule us, she declared, her voice carrying the quiet strength Jack had come to admire. God has brought us this far, he will not abandon us now. Jack helped her down from the sled, his rough hands gentle as he steadied her. You're right, he agreed, though worry still creased his brow. Best we focus on what we can do, not what might come. While Jack tended to the mule and unloaded their supplies, Nika bustled about the cabin's interior. She stoked the banked fire back to life, its warmth chasing away the winter chill that had settled during their absence. From their stores, she gathered the makings of a hearty supper, a plump rabbit Jack had snared the day before, root vegetables they'd bought in town, and dried herbs she'd carefully preserved. The familiar routine of cooking settled her spirit. She hummed an old hymn as she worked, one her mother had taught her in childhood. The rabbit stew slowly came together, filling the cabin with savory aromas that spoke of comfort and home. Jack came in from the cold, stamping snow from his boots. He paused in the doorway, watching Nika move about their small kitchen space with growing confidence. Something tight in his chest eased at the sight. "Smells like heaven itself," he said, hanging his coat by the door. Nika smiled, pleased. "It will warm us through. The Lord provides, even in winter." They sat down to supper as darkness gathered outside. The stew was rich and flavorful, chunks of tender meat and vegetables swimming in a perfectly seasoned broth. Jack broke off pieces of cornbread to soak up every drop. "Never ate so well before you came," he admitted between bites. "Was living on jerky and coffee most days." "That's no proper way to care for the body God gave you," Nika chided gently, but her eyes sparkled with pride at his appreciation. After the dishes were cleaned and put away, Jack surprised her by suggesting they step outside. "Night's clear," he explained. "Good for learning the stars." Nika hesitated only a moment before wrapping her shawl tightly around her shoulders and following him out. The cold hit her face like a slap, but the sight above took her breath away. Without the town's lamplight, the sky blazed with countless stars, more than she'd ever seen in her life. "It's beautiful," she whispered, awed by the vastness above them. Jack stood close behind her, his solid presence blocking some of the wind. He pointed upward, his arm extending past her shoulder. "See those 3 bright stars in a row? That's Orion's belt. Follow them down and left. That bright star is Sirius." Nika followed his guidance, picking out the patterns he described. "And these help with direction?" "They do." Jack's voice was warm with approval at her quick understanding. "The North Star, Polaris, stays fixed while all others wheel around it. Find it, and you'll never lose your way." He showed her how to locate the North Star using the Big Dipper as a guide. Nika listened intently, storing away each piece of knowledge. The night was bitterly cold, but neither seemed eager to go back inside. "I never knew the sky held such wonders," Nika said softly. "In my father's house, we focused so much on earthly duties. Sometimes I think we forgot to look up and see God's glory written in the heavens." Jack was quiet for a moment, considering her words. "I've lived alone in these mountains for 3 years, he finally said. "Watched these same stars every clear night, but sharing them now, they seem brighter somehow." Nika turned slightly toward him, her face lifted in the starlight. "I feel safe here," she confessed. "Safer than I've felt in years. Even with all the uncertainty ahead, I know this is where I'm meant to be." Something shifted in Jack's expression, a softening around his eyes. "Wife," he said, the word coming out gentle and reverent, carrying none of the awkwardness of their hasty ceremony. "My wife." Nika felt warmth bloom in her chest despite the cold. A blush crept up her cheeks, visible even in the starlight. This was different from their practical arrangement of necessity. This was something new and tender, sprouting like the first green shoot after winter. They stayed out longer, Jack pointing out more constellations, the Pleiades clustering like diamonds, Cassiopeia's distinctive W shape, the great arc of the Milky Way spilling across the black sky. When Nika finally began to shiver in earnest, they reluctantly headed back inside. The cabin was still warm from the banked fire. Jack added another log while Nika lit the lamp, its gentle glow creating a pool of golden light. Neither seemed ready for sleep, though it was well past their usual retiring time. "Shall we pray together?" Nika suggested softly. It had become their custom, though Jack was still sometimes hesitant in matters of faith. He nodded, and they knelt, side by side before the hearth. The firelight played across their faces as Nika began the prayer, her clear voice carrying the cadence of her people's devotions. "Lord, we thank thee for thy mercies, great and small, for safety and travel, for food to sustain us, for the beauty of thy creation that reminds us of thy majesty. We thank thee for this moment of peace." Jack's deeper voice joined hers, uncertain at first but growing stronger. "For showing us thy path even when the way seems dark. For bringing us together in thy sight. For teaching us to trust in thy wisdom above our own understanding." Their words mingled with the crackling of the fire and the soft whisper of wind outside the cabin walls. In that moment, all the day's worries, the council's indecision, Tanner's threats, the uncertain future, seemed to fade away. What remained was simpler and truer. Two souls, joined in faith and growing affection, finding strength in each other and in their shared belief in something greater than themselves. As the first hint of dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, they rose from their prayers. Nika's legs had grown stiff from kneeling so long, and she steadied herself with a hand on Jack's arm. The touch lingered, natural and unforced. "We should rest," Jack said softly, though he made no move to step away. "Day's coming soon enough." Nika nodded, but she too remained still for a moment longer. "Whatever comes," she said, "we'll face it together, with God's help." "Together," Jack agreed, and in that word was a promise deeper than any legal document could bind. They parted then, Nika to her bed in the small side room, Jack to his pallet near the fire. But something had shifted, between them as subtle and significant as the turning of the stars overhead. Their marriage of necessity was becoming something else, a true partnership, founded on respect and tender regard, growing stronger with each passing day. The winter sunset painted the snow-covered mountains in shades of purple and gold. Inside their cabin, Jack and Nika had just finished their evening meal of cornbread and beans. The peaceful domesticity of washing dishes together had become a cherished ritual, their hands brushing occasionally in the wash basin as Nika washed and Jack dried. The thundering of hooves shattered their quiet moment. Jack moved swiftly to the window, his shoulders tensing as he peered through the gathering dusk. "Sheriff Rusk," he said grimly, "and deputies." Nika's hands trembled as she dried them on her apron. "Has the council truly met so soon?" Before Jack could answer, heavy boots stomped across their porch. Sheriff Rusk's voice boomed through the door. "Open up, Hale. Got official business." Jack squeezed Nika's hand once before moving to unlatch the door. Sheriff Rusk stood framed in the doorway, his badge gleaming dully in the last light of day. Two deputies flanked him, their hands resting too casually near their gun belts. "Evening, Sheriff," Jack said evenly. "What brings you out this far so late?" Rusk's thin lips curved in what might have passed for a smile. "Council's ruled, Hale. The marriage ain't valid. Miss Yoder here is to return with us to town, where she'll be properly wed to Mr. Tanner as originally intended." "That's not possible," Jack said, his voice steady despite the tension visible in his jaw. "The council wasn't set to meet again until next week." "Plans change," Rusk drawled. "Now step aside." Jack planted himself more firmly in the doorway. "Show me the written verdict. Don't need to show you nothing." Rusk nodded to his deputies. "Get the girl." The deputies moved forward, trying to shoulder past Jack. He didn't draw his gun, though Nika could see his holstered weapon within easy reach. Instead, he braced himself against the doorframe, becoming an immovable barrier. "I said step aside," one deputy growled, shoving hard against Jack's chest. Jack absorbed the blow without striking back. "This is my home," he said clearly, his voice carrying into the winter air. "That's my wife you're trying to take. I demand to see a legal writ, properly witnessed and signed." The commotion had drawn attention. Lights flickered in nearby cabins and shapes moved in the growing darkness. Several of their neighbors emerged onto their porches, drawn by the raised voices. "What's all this, then?" called old Mr. Peterson from his property line. "Sheriff causing trouble for honest folks?" More voices joined in, curious and concerned. "Ain't right coming after people at supper time," someone muttered. "Man's got a right to see proper papers." Rusk's face darkened as he noticed their growing audience. "This ain't your concern, folks. Official business here." "Seems mighty strange kind of official," said Mrs. Turner, who ran the general store. "Council weren't meant to meet till Thursday next. My Henry sits on it, and he ain't heard nothing about no meeting." A low murmur of agreement rippled through the gathering crowd. Nika, still inside the cabin, felt her heart swell with gratitude for these neighbors who had gradually come to accept her and Jack. "Now see here," Rusk blustered, but the deputies were already exchanging uncertain glances. They'd signed on to enforce the law, not to face down an angry community. Jack hadn't moved an inch from the doorway. "Show us the proper documents," he repeated calmly, "or leave my property." Rusk's hand twitched toward his gun, but too many eyes were watching. Too many witnesses to what was starting to look less like law enforcement and more like harassment. "This ain't over," Rusk spat finally. "Next time I come, I'll bring writs and chains if I have to. That girl belongs to Tanner by right of promise, and no mountain man's gonna change that." "She belongs to herself," Jack replied, his voice hard as iron. "And she chose to be my wife before God and witnesses. Now get off my land." For a moment, the sheriff's face twisted with fury. But the watching crowd had grown larger, and even his deputies were backing away. With a final, savage glare, Rusk turned on his heel and stormed back to his horse. The deputies followed, relief evident in their hurried departure. Only when the sound of hoofbeats had faded did Jack finally step back inside and close the door. Nika flew into his arms, trembling with reaction. "I was so afraid," she whispered against his chest. "Afraid you would have to break your vow. Afraid there would be bloodshed." Jack's arms tightened around her. "Violence breeds violence," he said softly. "I learned that lesson too well to forget it now. But they could have hurt you. They could have tried." Jack's voice held a hint of grim humor. "I may have sworn off killing, but I remember how to take a punch and stay standing." Nika pulled back just enough to look up at his face. In the lamplight, she could see a bruise beginning to darken along his jaw where one deputy had struck him. With gentle fingers, she touched the mark. "You stood firm without raising a hand against them," she said. "That took more courage than drawing your gun would have." "Had to show them and myself that there's strength in standing peaceful," Jack replied. He caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "Besides, I made a promise to protect you." Didn't specify how. A knock at the door made them both jump, but this one was lighter, tentative. Jack opened it to find Mrs. Turner standing there with several other neighbors. "Brought you some supper," the storekeeper said, holding out a covered dish. "Figured yours might have gotten cold during all that fuss, and we wanted you to know. We'll be speaking up about this. Sheriff Rusk's gone too far, taking bribes from Tanner to act without proper authority." "Much obliged," Jack said, accepting the dish. More than the food, Nika knew he was grateful for the show of support. "We seen how you two built a proper life here," added Mr. Peterson. "Whatever that paper marriage says or doesn't say, you're husband and wife true enough for us plain folk." Nika felt tears welling in her eyes. "Thank you," she managed. "Your kindness means more than we can say." After their neighbors had gone, Jack and Nika sat close together by the fire. The borrowed dish proved to be a hearty stew, which they shared in thoughtful silence. "Rusk will be back," Jack said finally. "With papers this time, legal or forged." "I know." Nika leaned her head against his shoulder. "But we're not alone anymore. The town is watching now." "They are." Jack's arm curved around her protectively. "And I meant what I said. You chose me, chose this life. I'll defend that choice with everything I have. Without violence," Nika murmured, proud and grateful. "Without violence," Jack agreed. "There are other kinds of strength." They sat together as the fire burned low, drawing comfort from each other's presence, and the knowledge that their marriage, beginning as mere convenience, had grown into something worth fighting for, not with fists or guns, but with the quiet courage of conviction and the steady support of community. Jack's boots wore a path across the cabin's wooden floor as he paced back and forth, his shoulders heavy with exhaustion and defeat. The lantern cast his shadow long against the wall, making his movements seem like those of a caged animal. His hands kept straying to the empty holster at his hip, then jerking away as if burned. "I feel so powerless," he confessed, his voice rough. "All those years my gun hand solved every problem. Now." He stopped at the window, staring into the darkness. "Those men I killed, their faces still haunt me. But how can I protect you without fighting?" Nika rose from her chair by the fire, her quiet steps bringing her to his side. "True courage isn't found in taking life," she said softly, laying her hand on his arm. "It's in standing firm for what's right, even when you're afraid." "I don't know how anymore," Jack whispered. "Been so long since I trusted anything but steel and powder." "Then let me show you." Nika knelt on the rough floorboards, tugging gently at his hand. "Pray with me, Jack. God's wisdom is greater than our fear." Slowly, as if his knees had forgotten how, Jack sank down beside her. Nika's clear voice lifted in prayer, asking for guidance, for strength, for wisdom beyond their own understanding. Jack's deeper voice joined hers, breaking as he spoke words long forgotten. "Lord, forgive my pride," he prayed, tears tracking down his weathered cheeks. "Forgive my fear. I've trusted too long in my own strength." That night, Jack dreamed. In the dream, his brother stood before him, young and whole as he'd been before the feud that claimed his life. "Choose peace, Jack," his brother said, smiling. "It's the harder path, but the right one." Jack woke with the first gray light of dawn streaming through the window. He found Nika already up, preparing. Breakfast at the hearth. The dream's clarity still rang in his mind like a church bell. "We need to go back to town," he announced, his voice steady with newfound purpose. "To the church. We'll demand a proper marriage ceremony before everyone. Let them all witness our vows, not because our first ones weren't true, but because we have nothing to hide." Nika turned to him, hope brightening her face. "You're sure?" "Yes." Jack's eyes were clear, the haunted look finally gone. "I've been fighting this battle wrong. It's not about guns or fists anymore. It's about faith. In God. In each other. In doing what's right." The Sunday morning sun cast golden light through the church's windows as Jack and Nika made their way up the wooden steps. Jack wore his cleanest flannel shirt and dark wool coat, while Nika's simple blue dress and white prayer cap marked her Amish heritage. Their boots echoed on the floorboards as they walked down the center aisle. The pews creaked under the weight of what seemed like the entire town. Whispers rustled like autumn leaves as neighbors leaned close to share opinions. Some faces showed sympathy, others skepticism, but all eyes followed the couple's steady progress to the front. Reverend Tully stood before the altar, his well-worn Bible open in his weathered hands. Sunlight caught the silver at his temples as he nodded gravely to Jack and Nika. The morning light streaming through the windows painted patterns across the wooden floor, like God's own blessing upon the gathering. Jack's voice rang clear and strong through the church as he spoke his vows. "Before God and these witnesses, I pledge my life and love to Nika. Not from desperation or convenience, but because God brought her to my door for a purpose." His blue eyes never left Nika's face. "I vow to protect and cherish her until death parts us." Nika's soft voice carried surprising strength as she responded. "I chose Jack freely, and with love," she declared, her quiet words reaching every corner of the hushed church. "Not from fear or necessity, but because I saw in him a good and godly man. Our first vows were true, and today I gladly speak them again." From the back pew, Eli Tanner surged to his feet, his face dark with rage. "This is nonsense. She was promised to me." But before he could finish, the congregation stirred. "Let them be," called out Mrs. Peterson from the quilting circle. "Sit down, Tanner," shouted Tom Baker, who'd once mocked Jack's peaceful ways. Other voices joined in, drowning out Tanner's protests. Jack stood tall beside Nika, his calm resolve earning respectful nods from men who'd previously scorned him. Even Sheriff Rusk looked away, shame flickering across his face. Reverend Tully's voice rose above the commotion. "By the authority vested in me, and before these witnesses, I pronounce you husband and wife." Tanner stormed down the aisle and slammed through the church doors, his humiliation complete. But inside, the congregation's unified approval wrapped around Jack and Nika like a warm blanket, their marriage now sanctified, beyond any dispute. The last rays of sunset painted the snow-covered path in shades of rose and gold as Jack and Nika approached their cabin. Their boots crunched softly in the fresh powder, leaving twin trails behind them. The smoke curling from their chimney welcomed them home, promising warmth against the gathering dusk. Inside, Jack paused by the stone fireplace, carefully lifting his long rifle from its familiar spot at his side. His calloused hands moved with deliberate grace as he placed it upon the wooden mantel. Beside it, Nika set her white prayer bonnet, its strings falling in gentle loops. The two items rested there together, his weapon of past violence beside her symbol of strict tradition, now transformed into markers of their shared journey. "Strange how things change," Jack mused, his voice soft. "Never thought I'd see the day when laying down my rifle felt right." Nika moved about the cabin with quiet purpose, her blue skirt swishing against the rough-hewn floor. She set their wooden table with care, placing their two tin plates closer together than ever before. A fat tallow candle gleamed in the window, its light a beacon of welcome in the growing darkness. The hearth fire crackled merrily as Nika stirred a pot of rich venison stew. Fresh-baked bread, golden and crusty, cooled on the sideboard, filling the cabin with its homely scent. This was no mere meal for survival. It was their first true family supper. Outside, snow began to fall, each flake catching the candlelight as it drifted past the window. The soft patter against the roof wrapped them in a cocoon of peace, far removed from the morning's drama at the church. Jack bowed his head over their simple feast, his voice steady and sure. "Lord, I thank you for this second chance at life and love, for bringing Nika to my door that winter night, and for showing me that your path leads through peace, not violence." Nika leaned against his shoulder, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I have found my home," she whispered, her gentle accent wrapping around the words like a caress. "Not in a place, but in thee." The firelight danced across their faces as Jack began to hum, the notes of the hymn Nika had taught him rising clear and true. She joined in, her sweet voice weaving through his deeper tones. "Great is thy faithfulness morning by morning. New mercies I see." Their voices blended in the quiet cabin, no longer separated by fear or doubt. The harmony of their song matched the peace in their hearts, rising with the smoke from their chimney into the starlit night. The fire popped and sparked in accompaniment, as if nature itself celebrated their union. In that moment, the cabin was more than shelter. It was sanctuary. More than a refuge, it was home. Their shared faith and love had transformed them both, turning a marriage of necessity into one of deep devotion. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.